What's up, you guys? It's Kristen Feemster, licensed therapist and wellness coach, and today we are tapping back into our conversation around boundaries. So I'm going to set the stage for this a little bit. Now picture this, all right? It's 10:51 p.m. at night, and you're scrolling on your phone. You know that you have to be up early in order to get your workout in, prep your mindset for the day, perhaps get something together for work. You know that you have set a goal of getting up a little bit earlier in order to take care of you before flinging yourself into work. But it's 10:59 p.m. at this point, and you're scrolling on your phone. Next thing you know, it's 12:01, and you're still perhaps scrolling on your phone. All right. Then we wake up the next morning. I'm already saying we. Too personal, too soon. Anyway, you wake up the next morning and your alarm goes off at your original committed time, 6 a.m. Let's say 5:30 a.m., right? You hit snooze. 15 minutes goes by, your alarm snooze goes off again. Actually, it's 9 minutes that goes by and then your alarm snooze goes off again. And it alerts you to wake up. Then you hit snooze again. And next thing you know, it's 6:45 and you only have enough time to do what you normally do, which is wash yourself, get your face together, fling yourself into some clothes, and get out of the door for work or your next obligation. Now, there is no prep for breakfast. There is no thought of lunch. You're going to figure it out when you get there. Then we go to lunch, and you said that you were going to start trying to not eat so much takeout for lunch. And you said you were going to start bringing your lunch to work. And then now we're stressed from the work day for a lack of boundaries, which we're going to talk about later with work. But you get the point. And this whole scenario just poses the question of, why do we break the promises that we make to ourselves so easily? We cannot talk about setting boundaries with other people or other people honoring our boundaries until we talk about the boundaries that we set with ourselves. There is a space for honoring the things that you need to do in order to show up as your best self, in order to be at peace with yourself, in order to take care of yourself. And too many times we break the promises that we make to ourselves. We prioritize them in a way that does not put them at the forefront of how we run our day. And it ultimately just leaves us in a worn out mental and emotional and physical state. Boundaries are the ways that we honor our standards for ourselves around our time, our energy, and our emotional needs. And just as much as we ask those of other people, we also have to create a standard for ourselves within ourselves around the expectations we have for ourselves. So it poses the question of, why is it so hard to set boundaries with ourselves? And number one, I think there's an element of comfort. We can sometimes want comfort in any of the ways that we can steal it from the other places. And this can be a result of not setting boundaries in other places in your life, to a point where we've given so much of ourselves to other people that we don't even have the capacity and the energy to govern ourselves in a boundaried way, in ways that we probably could benefit from. But all in all, that's about being comfortable in the moment. When I'm up scrolling on my phone late at night, or you're up scrolling on your phone late at night, it's about having an element of comfort and escape and fun for that moment. And it may not necessarily be serving us the best that it can. Sometimes we feel like we're missing out. We don't want to feel like we're missing out. We don't want to feel restricted, like we can't do what we want to do. And so we even rebel against our own rules, our own promises for ourselves, because we just want to let go. We just want to have fun. And we don't know of any other way to do that but to sacrifice our boundaries within ourselves. Sometimes we confuse boundaries with ourselves with like punishment or restriction. I think about this, and when it comes to dieting a lot, we get conditioned to think about, self-control around food or, different things as being a very rigid thing, an all or nothing thing. And we don't ever really learn that we don't have to, treat ourselves all the time. Sometimes we do need to reel things in a way that allows for grace and flexibility, but there is a balance to be had, and it's not necessarily rooted in punishment all the time. I also can think about this with exercise. A lot of people think that working out and physical activity, they kind of equate it with dying and killing themselves and hurting themselves and that sort of thing mentally, because they've always viewed it as being a punishment, when really it can be a standard of honoring our bodies, taking care of our bodies. So with everything that we're talking about, when you set a boundary with yourself, we don't want it to be rooted in being harsh and shame and guilt and an embarrassment. We want this to be protective, honoring, respectful, right? So that is the posture that I want you to think about. We never want to set boundaries with ourselves out of shame and guilt, similar to how we don't want to set boundaries with other people out of shame and guilt. It's about honoring, respecting, and upholding ourselves in a way that allows us to be our best self. When it comes to what this looks like, most of us, maybe if you haven't already identified yourself at this point, I'm going to give you 3 telltale signs that you are lacking boundaries with yourself. Number 1 being that you have a pattern of breaking promises to yourself. This sounds like committing to a certain bedtime, committing to a certain workout regimen, committing to a certain goal, and then continually finding excuses to delay, procrastinate, or cancel that plan altogether. The promises you make to yourself are very important, but for whatever reason, we see them as being negotiable. We see them as being, we could take it, we could leave it, I could do it, I could not do it. And we delay. We layer an excuse in. There can be explanations, but sometimes if they're very cyclical, we have to understand how breaking those promises to ourselves is a form of self-sabotage. And now maybe sometimes we may need to look and reconsider what type of promise we're making to begin with. Is it realistic? But once we have understood and decided on a realistic goal or a realistic standard for ourselves, it's so important that we find ways to honor that. That's really where your self-esteem, self-confidence, sense of self-worth, self-value is rooted in. It's about how you deal with you more oftentimes than it is how you deal with other people. You constantly feel like you're behind, like you're just always playing catch up. It's never enough. This could be a sign that your standards or your expectations are too high, but it could also be that you're selling yourself short and setting the boundaries with yourself that you need to maximize your life. This, y'all, is across the board with all kinds of ways that we can begin to utilize self-control a little bit more, utilize discipline a little bit more to make sure that we're staying on top of things that we need to stay on top of. I think about this when it comes to just regular things like doctor checkups and dental appointments, the basics, of your health. Sometimes we can delay. And next thing you know, it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't been, I got to get this done. I got to get that done. I've got all these things going on, and it's because we haven't necessarily called ourselves up a little bit to have a standard. But it can also go with any type of personal goals or personal structures that you're needing. You just feel like you can never quite get to it. A lot of times that's maybe because we're overcommitted in other areas. We've pulled way back on expectations for ourselves, and we're out of balance. And the last sign that I want to mention is relying on guilt and shame to get you going. This is a tough one. This is a tough one because remember I said boundaries are about honoring. It's about respect. It's about elevating. It's about being proud. It's not about being ashamed and feeling guilty about things and using that as the driving force. If that's the energy that you're using in order to move yourself forward, there's a need for more boundaries and structure in your life in general. Because one, nothing that is rooted in shame and guilt is going to last very long. And even if it does sustain itself for a while, that's not the headspace that you want to be motivated out of for your life. We want to be motivated out of a place that's more positive, a little bit more affirming and uplifting and encouraging, because that's where sustainability is. So how do we fix this? I'm going to give you a simple strategy of increasing your awareness and figuring out how to get out of your own way, how to honor your own boundaries, how to keep your own promises. And number 1 is that you've got to recognize your pattern. There's no new excuse under the sun. And if you pay really close attention, you'll probably find that it's the same issue that's preventing you from moving forward. It can be helped by having a therapist, having a coach, having a sounding board, having a trusted person that you are comfortable with, pointing some things out to you, holding you accountable a little bit, not rooted in shame, not rooted in chastising you, but just helping you to notice. But sometimes you can even notice it yourself. Like, I always do this, at this day and age, after you live some life, you're like, I've heard this all before. I have played this song in tune and done this dance before. I commit to something, I overshoot, I hit burnout, and then I go into a victim mindset. Let's say, for example, a victim mindset of why is it so hard? I start to feel bad for myself. I have a self-pity party. Next thing you know, I've broken the promises of showing up for myself consistently. And then the cycle of shame motivated action starts again, and it repeats. Or it could be that I set a goal for myself, but I don't set the boundaries with other people to prioritize what needs to be prioritized. And so I get in the middle of trying to honor myself, trying to show up for other people, having communicated none of it to the other people around what to expect from me or what I'm going to be doing differently. And so then I'm overwhelmed. Now I'm emotionally overwhelmed, doing the most. And the one thing that I negotiate more than anything is my promises with myself. When this shows up next month or next week, I'm not going to be surprised by it or feel as if this is a brand new situation and circumstance or a unique circumstance. I'm going to recognize it. Now I've got a little bit more power and control over how I handle this. And when you have that power and control in that moment where you have that awareness of here I go, I want you to insert some value and a why around why pushing past this moment is important to you long term. So we've got to kind of pull our emotions back. We got to catch ourselves in the moment. We got to kind of regulate our emotions around it because things come up. Our emotions are high or intense or whatever, and we just want the feelings to go away. But in those moments, that's when we really have to activate why. Why should I move forward and push through on this? What is the benefit for me long term? You got to be able to name both the cycle and the reason why you're showing up differently in that moment. And then the last thing that you've got to do is you got to handle the situation at hand, but you also got to find a little bit of adaptability, flexibility with what you got going on. All right. Because you're not going to be perfect. And I think that sometimes when we are set a promise for ourselves with no flexibility, set a boundary with no fluidity to it, no ability to have some grace involved, you're kind of just setting yourself up for failure. So in that moment where you've named your cycle, you're about to hit it, you're activating your why, you're pulling in your value as to why you want to move forward. The next thing you got to do is find a way forward that is not rigid and all or nothing. How can obviously I'm wanting to, have some me time. Let's go back to our original example. Obviously, I'm wanting to have some sort of me time and downtime with myself before I go to bed. I can honor that. I know why I need not do that until midnight, but I can also honor that and figure out a way to let some of my need be met in that moment while also looking out for the me in the morning that really wants to show up and do things differently. So this is where compromise can really kind of help you figure out a boundary with some grace. Sometimes when we have the boundary and it's just all or nothing, it's like no more phone at night. Nope, I'm cutting it off. I'm not going to do it. No phone at all. And it's like, girl, is that realistic? Now, how many nights in a row do you feel like you're going to do that? You know what I'm saying? So you got to make sure that you are rooting these things in reality and giving some grace. Here's a way that I do that with my workouts. I'm a person who stays active. My typical regimen at this point is 3-4 days of some sort of strength training. Okay, so that's using weights, body weights, whatever, but that's muscle maintenance, muscle building exercises. And then I have days where I have my group fitness classes, which to be honest with you are a little bit more social than anything, but they're fun. It's kind of like a hobby. Okay, so we sprinkle some of those in. Some weeks that regimen of 3-4 strength workouts at the gym and going to my classes, sometimes that's not feasible. Okay, and what I do is I kind of flex the goal a little bit to where my baseline, my boundary with myself is daily movement. Even if that comes all the way down to a simple walk 10 minutes right here in my, in my neighborhood, in my complex, 10 minutes of movement and a stretch when I get home, or a stretch in the morning, walk at night, whatever combination. My standard is daily movement. So I've got a standard, I've got a boundary with myself. I'm not going to go several days without moving my body and taking care of my body. One, because it's a part of my profession, but also it's a part of my lifestyle. It's a part of my recovery. It's just a really solid foundational thing in my life. And it's a non-negotiable in that sense. But the way I move my body and what I need in order to fulfill that promise to myself has a bit more flex to it. So in this moment, I'd love for you to pause and think about what's a way that you've been crossing your own boundary, removing your own boundary, compromising your own standards for the sake of temporary relief or to prioritize something else in your life. I really want you to think about what that area is, and I want you to apply the strategy that I've talked about, where you're going to name your cycle, right? And you're going to think about what your why and what your value is going to be in those moments where it's so easy to just like give in, right? And then you're going to strategize how you can honor the boundary within the environment or the situation that it presents itself. In this moment where I could go left or go right, is there any give while holding this boundary that I can allow for, just because we're human beings and life happens? Is there some wiggle room that I can allow that allows me to keep my promise to myself and also realize that sometimes circumstances change? Thank you all for joining me for today's video. In the next part of the series, we are going to talk about work. This take that I'm going to give you is really going to help you find freedom in your relationship with work, how you show up for work, and ultimately how you set boundaries with work and with yourself when it comes to your job. So I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.